Now, Behind the Law with Justin Clark and Behind the Law with Justin Clark and Allie Mack on ESPN 580 Orlando.
And welcome to the program. It's another edition of Behind the Law right here on ESPN 580 Orlando. Thank you for spending your evenings here with us, 8 o'clock p.m. every single weeknight. You can also watch the TV show. It's Behind the Law on television this Sunday and every Sunday, 10 a.m., TV 27. You can also watch the show every single weeknight at about 4 o'clock. Follow at Behind the Law Radio. We talk sports, law, lifestyle. Thank you for always joining us. And a very special guest. We're going to break format a little bit today because of the guests that we have today. And because normally I would say to my left, it's Allie Mack. To my right, Brianna. They're both not here today. Can you believe it? I think, first of all, let me bring in Pat Williams. Pat, it's so nice of you to come in. I know you've written a new book, but I think the girls were nervous. I think
why'd they run off?
I don't know, but it's unbelievable. I think that they just think so highly of you. They're too nervous. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Calm them down. Calm them down. Tell them I'm not going to just frighten them or scare them.
Pat Williams is here today. He is, you know who he is, Senior Vice President of the Orlando Magic, author, speaker, father, so many different things. But you've written this new outstanding book, Pat, Character Carved in Stone, the 12 Core Virtues of West Point that build leaders and produce success. Tell me about this book.
Well, here's what happened, Justin. I was invited a few years ago to speak up at West Point to their sports teams, men and women, and the coaches, and I did that. It was a great experience. And then they gave me a tour of the campus. That's an amazing experience to just absorb all that history of all these men and women who have gone through West Point. There's a little park on the campus, and we ended up over there. It's called Trophy Point. Looks out over the Hudson River. It's a beautiful, beautiful little spot. And I noticed in that park a bench. Now, I guess most parks have a bench. This one, however, was made of stone. And then I looked further into the little park, and I noticed another bench and another, and I counted them. There were 12 benches. I said, that's a lot of benches for one little park. I don't think people are here just sitting. But for some reason, I've decided to look at one of those benches a little closer. And sure enough, I'm glad I did, because at the end of the bench was a word carved into the stone. And I looked on the other end of the bench, and that same word was carved on the other end. And I went to some other benches, and they had the same thing, but with a different word carved into the bench. In fact, there were 12 benches and 12 words carved into those benches. Words like courage, trust, integrity, loyalty, responsibility, determination, perseverance, those kind of words. And then I thought there's got to be a backstory here, and sure enough there was. The West Point class of 1935 donated those benches to the school as a class gift. And they also came up with those words because they felt those were the words that would guide and help and direct students at the school in their roles and their leadership roles in the military and beyond.
How do you find the time? I mean, that's one of those things. How do you find the time with all you have going on to actually write a book?
Well, it's a great question. I think after doing this 100 and some times, you begin to learn, how to do it more efficiently. I remember Justin coming back and thinking, boy, that's a well-kept secret, those benches. I said, I've never heard of this. I don't remember ever reading about it. So I went to the publisher and I said, I think this is how this might work. Let's do a chapter on each one of these words and then figure out a West Point product who best exemplified that particular word. And they agreed that that would be a good way to do it. And so that's how we put the book together. So you'll read about Ulysses S. Grant in the chapter on compassion. You'll read about Dwight D. Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur, West Point grads. You'll read about General Omar Bradley and General Blackjack Pershing. You'll read about Matthew Ridgway. And then we did a chapter on your coach Mike Krzyzewski, who's a West Point grad. And Coach K also did the foreword for us, which we were very pleased about.
Absolutely.
So that's how we went about putting the book together. It's been out, Justin, just a few weeks, but we're quite encouraged by the early response to the book.
How do we buy it, and what different forms can I buy this book? You know, we're not in the day where you used to go to Books A Million and purchase a book. I mean, the art of writing a book and selling a book must have changed.
Well, I'm old-fashioned, Justin. I still love bookstores, even though they're dwindling somewhat in numbers, but I love to go to Barnes & Noble.
Oh, so do I.
I love to go to Books A Million and see what's out and see what the new books are and go to that front table, and I still get great joy from that. And fortunately, the book is in the bookstores. But as you pointed out, it's so easy to go up on Amazon and order the book, Character Carved in Stone. Revell is the publisher. It's easy to go to barnesandnoble.com. And if you're traveling, the good news on this book, it's in bookstores in the airports.
Oh, great.
I've heard from somebody in the Atlanta airport, and I was coming through Austin, Texas last week, and sure enough, there were some books in the bookstore in Austin, Texas. So I'm encouraged by the fact that the book is out there, and that's half the battle. If people can pick it up and thumb through it, as I do with books, and then make a determination, is this worth buying?
Absolutely. Justin Clark here, talking to Pat Williams. How you doing health-wise, Pat? I hope you're doing well.
Well, that's good news, Justin. I'm in the 9th year now of this multiple myeloma battle. I was diagnosed in January of 2011. Multiple myeloma is one of the blood cancers. It's actually the blood in the marrow of the bone, so it's a blood disorder and a bone issue as well. But the good news is I've responded well to all the different treatments and many prayers that have been offered on my behalf. I feel good. I'm able to keep my full schedule. And the doctors tell me they don't see any signs of it.
Good, beautiful.
So those have been good reports.
I happen to follow this excellent singer on Instagram, and I see sometimes she's performing across the country, really, and it turns out it's your daughter. How is she doing?
Goodness.
She's a fantastic singer, huh?
Well, Karen lives in Nashville with her husband, Brian. Karen is a gospel and country singer. She travels with a marvelous comedian named Shonda Pierce, and they're in a different church every night, traveling by bus during the night and get to the next stop. Karen has a new record out. We're proud of that, and she's doing well. She's enjoying her life in Nashville, loves to sing. She just got back from a 10-day trip to the Holy Land, which was a huge experience for them. And the trip was led by none other than Mike Huckabee.
Oh, is that right?
Who in his real life is a pastor, a Baptist preacher. He's been everything else. He's been a governor and a candidate to run for president, and he's been a TV host and all of the above. But Karen said in that setting, with him leading and talking and preaching through Israel, Karen said it was absolutely tremendous.
So writing a book takes a lot of energy, of course, but then once the book is done, you have to sell some books, and you've got to go talk to people like me. I saw you were up in New York. I mean, do you enjoy that part of selling a book, the actual interviewing and traveling around, or is that really tiresome for you?
Well, Justin, it demands a lot of energy and focus, but writing, let me go back. Coming up with an idea is one thing. Then selling the publisher is another thing. Then getting the book written is the next thing. But it can't stop there.
Right.
Because if you don't go out and tell people about the book and promote it and get the word out, guess what's going to happen to that book in most cases?
You might not be asked to write another one because it didn't sell a lot.
You're right. And here's the deal with publishers. You're only as good as your last book. And if your last book didn't do well, you can almost come up with the best idea in the world, but chances are you're going to have to take it to another publisher.
Very, very true. Plenty more ahead with Pat Williams, Senior Vice President of the Orlando Magic and author of the brand new book, Character Carved in Stone. Stick around. We'll be right back. It's Behind the Law, ESPN 580 Orlando. Pat, I brought you a water there, too, if you want.
It.
Okay,
Thank
great.
You. Thank you.
Now back to Behind the Law with Justin Clark, right here on ESPN 580 Orlando.
Welcome back to the show. It is ESPN 580 Orlando. Attorney Justin Clark spinning your evenings with you. You can watch the show this Sunday, 10 a.m. TV 27. Also follow us at Behind the Law Radio. You can watch the show right there. Ali Mack is out. The beautiful Brianna is out, but very special guest joins us today. He's the Senior Vice President of the Orlando Magic, author, speaker, father, and the author of the brand new book, Character Carved in Stone. Pat Williams is here. Pat, how are you, sir? Thanks for being here.
Well, I'm doing well, Justin. I'm always impressed with how you, talking about many balls in the air.
Yeah, right.
I mean, a full-time lawyer and now a radio and media star. And
yeah. Dwight Bain told me to say hi to you, by the way. Good friend of mine, and he always raves about you, too. I love the guy to
Dwight's
death.
a longtime friend, and he is a counselor at a very high level.
And my wife adores him. I mean, he really sort of saved our marriage at times, because I think our relationships go through a difficult time, and we had two young kids, certainly not 19, but our two young kids, and I'm so thankful that they get to come downstairs every day, and mom and dad are both there, and a lot of that we attribute to Dwight. So Dwight's always going to be a dear friend to us. But
it's good to hear.
You talked about the book. It's the 12 core virtues that really you learned from West Point graduates. I have a question for you. Help me understand this, because you've been a very successful person. And when you do that, there are times in life where you deal with irrational people at times. In my job too, we can work so hard for someone, and then it just strikes me, Pat, that there are some people who might just be irrational. What sort of virtue is that to help you deal with irrational people?
Well, let me say this, Justin. They're out there, and the best advice, if you can, unless they're under your roof, try not to get too deeply linked up with them.
Right. Makes good sense.
Try to not let that relationship go too far.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've learned. Irrational people can develop a crush on you or an addiction to you. They can start calling on the phone incessantly. Almost they're needy. And somehow or other, you've got to try and nip that in the bud.
Yeah, fully agree.
Or they're addicted to mail or cards or something. You've got to do your best not to encourage them. Yes, I'm all for kindness and I'm all for Christian love, but in some cases you've got to just make sure that you draw a line. Now, in the case, Justin, if that's a case in a marriage, that's a whole other ballgame. And let me just say this, because I've lived through this and seen this. And this is a piece of advice from Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. He said, be absolutely sure that you marry the right person. Somebody once asked Truett, what's the key to success? He said, make absolutely sure that you marry the right person. If you marry the wrong person, he said, they can completely destroy you.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Or they can undermine you, or they can just make your life so difficult. So I advise particularly young people, take your time. Take your time. See this person in every situation you can. Study their friends. Make sure you know the ins and outs of their parents. I mean, don't rush, and be very, very careful that you're marrying the right person. That would be the best advice I could give to young and old alike.
What about this? So you've been the boss of Dr. J, Charles Barkley, Shaq, Penny Hardaway. You've done some incredible things, not just in life, but in sports, on a national level. But then at some point, you would go home to a wife and 2 kids. How do you stay grounded when you're celebrated so much in your career and your professional life, and then you go home? How do you stay grounded?
Well, Justin, at home, over the years, I was never viewed by my wife or my children, whether they were birthed here or adopted from other countries. They never viewed me as a big shot. They certainly didn't act that way. There was one thing on their mind, primarily, the prime thing on their mind. Dad, are you going to be at our game tonight?
Right.
Or, Dad, are you going to be at our swimming meet on Saturday? Or, Dad, are you going to watch me cheer at the football game on Friday night? More than anything else, as I recall, that was their prime concern.
Yeah.
And now, with the grandchildren that we've got, and they're all into their activities, they want to make sure that we're there watching if we can. Now, they understand that about full lives and all this, but boy, they love it when somebody is there. If Poppers and Gigi, are there to watch.
Absolutely. And how did you do that? I mean, how did you really run these basketball organizations and the National Basketball Association and have time at night or weekends or whenever to spend time with the family? How do you really balance those things?
Justin, I did not get to all their events. I mean, I was at every Magic home game. I did not travel on the road. There was really no need for that. I was out scouting, and I had other obligations, and there were speaking events. And for a while, I beat myself up over this. Am I missing these children? Am I doing something here that's damaging? But then it occurred to me, when I realized we had an $80,000 a year food bill for a while.
Right.
And we had a house mortgage. And we had clothing issues with 18 children at the time. We had college coming up. So I got over the feeling of guilt. Because if I was not producing the revenue that it took to do all of that, these kids would be down the rat hole. And so I got over the issue of guilt.
Right. And
in the meantime, I was not a golfer. I didn't go on fishing trips. I was not a stamp collector. Didn't go out to hunt deer or whatever. I helped run a basketball team, and I made some speeches. But I always had penciled in on my calendar the kids' sports schedules or their singing events or their theater deals or whatever. That took precedence over anything else I was doing other than the work that I was doing.
Right. And I think that they do, and I'm asking these questions obviously because I'm the father of young children now with very busy, businesses and things, and I've always looked up to you for seeming to be able to balance some incredible career, the incredible career path that you were on, but also with raising children. And let's get to the children really quick. It's Justin Clark, by the way, talking to Pat Williams. It's 19 kids, I believe, Pat, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I believe 14 of them are adopted.
That's correct.
How did you and your wife at the time really start to say, you know what, we want to adopt some children? How does that really come over your body to say we're going to start adopting?
Well, for the first 10 years of our marriage, my wife talked incessantly about adopting children that didn't look like us. She had, as a little girl, she had dolls, Oriental dolls, to play with. And now she wanted real-life Oriental dolls. In the meantime, we had birthed kids. We had 3 children, and I was in Philadelphia at this point running the 76ers, and we were on the verge of winning an NBA title with Dr. J and Moses Malone and company. But yet, my wife was not happy. She was on the verge of depression. And I realized this adoption thing was a far bigger deal than I had imagined, because I was opposed to it. I didn't encourage it. I put it down. You know, it was harsh.
Right.
But then I realized we had a crisis under our roof. And I decided I better get on this fast. So out of a clear blue sky, basically, I became the aggressor. I found out there was an agency, Holt International, that dealt with international adoptions. I found out that South Korea was the country where you could most readily adopt. I found the lady in Trenton, New Jersey, who ran that division, explained what we were after, and a little while later she called and said, listen, I've got a little photograph here of 2 girls that are available in South Korea. They're 2 and 3. Would you like to see the photo? Well, she came to our house in Moorestown, New Jersey, with this little grainy black and white picture of these 2 forlorn-looking little girls who had been left apparently at a police station in Seoul. And we had a little family vote, and the vote was, yes, we want them. Well, we won the NBA title in late May of 1983, and in September of 83, these 2 little girls arrived at the Philadelphia airport, escorted by 2 off-duty flight attendants, and there they were, dropped in our arms at the Philly airport.
Wow.
And our 3 children suddenly now had 2 more. We had 5 children. The founder of that Holt agency was there by chance, Bertha Holt. Her last words to us were, don't forget the homegrowns, because she knew that wherever we went, the big fuss would be over those 2 little Oriental dolls.
Unbelievable.
Well, those 2 little Oriental dolls are now pushing along into their late 30s. Andrea has 4 children, including twin boys. And Sarah has a 14-year-old and a 3-year-old, both girls. So we have 6 grandchildren that those 2 little South Korean dolls, sisters, have produced. Wow. Anyway, Justin, at that point, I caught the bug big time. I became very aggressive. And after we moved here to Orlando, we learned about twin boys from South Korea. And we had another vote, and the vote was, let's do it. And that's how Stephen and Thomas got here at age 5. They also are moving into their late 30s. Stephen lives in New York. They're both married. Thomas lives in Boston. He's got a 2.5-year-old boy and just got word that there's another little boy on the way.
Wow.
And then came the 4 boys from the Philippines, and then 2 little girls from Romania, and then 4 children from Brazil. I think it's safe to say we probably were out of control.
Maybe.
I mean, like one day, Jimmy, our oldest son, came to me and said, Dad, don't you think you could get some other families to help you with this?
Right.
I think Jimmy felt they're never going to stop. Well, eventually we did, and that was a big enough family. They're all grown now. The oldest is 47. The youngest is 33.
Wow.
They're all out on their own, and we're soon to have our 20th grandkid.
More right ahead with Pat Williams, Senior Vice President of the Orlando Magic and author of the new book, Character Carved in Stone. It's Behind the Law, ESPN 580 Orlando.
Now back to Behind the Law with Justin Clark, right here on ESPN 580 Orlando.
And welcome back to the show. It is Behind the Law, ESPN 580 Orlando. Justin Clark here with you. Thank you for spending your evenings with me. You can watch the TV show. It's Behind the Law on TV this Sunday and every Sunday, 10 a.m. on TV 27. Also follow us at Behind the Law Radio on Facebook, Instagram, any social media platform. You can watch the show right there about 4 o'clock every single afternoon. Allie Mack is out today. The beautiful Brianna, they're both traveling. But we have a very special guest in the studio, Pat Williams, Senior VP of the Orlando Magic, author, speaker, father, just genuinely fantastic guy. But he has a new book out that I really want you to go check out. It's Character Carved in Stone, the 12 Core Virtues of West Point that build leaders and produce success. Pat, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Justin. I'm glad that you've told people about this book. You see, everything rises and falls on leadership. It always has, it always will. And what West Point is doing is developing leaders for the future. That's the prime reason that school exists. They are developing leaders, yes, for the military. Many of those young people will graduate, get further training, and end up in Afghanistan, for example, or in Korea, or Iraq, or wherever other hot spots are.
Right.
And so they need these young men and women to be really well versed in this area of leadership. That's why I have such respect for our military academies, Annapolis and West Point, and the Air Force Academy, the Coast Guard Academy. Those young men and women are special. And so I'm intrigued with leadership, Justin. I've been in leadership positions in sports probably since high school, then on through college at Wake Forest, and now 57 years in professional athletics. So I've been in the leadership positions, but I also have studied it in great depth. What are the qualities? What are the characteristics of the world's greatest leaders? What do they have? Are there common threads, common traits that these men and women have? And I've come to the conclusion that yes, there are. And that's what really has fueled so much of my speaking and my writing, based on these 7 principles that I have learned and studied about that great leaders have. And the good news is, all of your listeners, Justin, all of us in leadership positions, we all get better. We're not locked into one area of leadership, and that's where we're always going to stay. And we're all leaders, whether we're moms and dads, or whether we're grandparents, whether we're husbands and wives, whether we have positions in our work, whether we are coaching a little league team. I mean, we are all in positions of leadership in some fashion.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to really understand leadership and really work at it and improve. And that's what I've tried to do with my books and my speaking.
Well, talk to me about some of those qualities. I mean, what are some qualities that you genuinely have found in leaders over your life?
Well, the first quality that every leader possesses, everyone has possessed and must possess, is simply called vision. Great leaders see before others. As Ronald Reagan said, to grasp and hold a vision is the very essence of successful leadership. So visionary leaders see farther down the road than others. They see in a wider scope. They see in vivid technicolor. And when I've got a new book coming out this fall, it's called Lead Like Walt. And we're going to look at Walt Disney through the narrow focus of leadership. And Walt's greatest strength as a leader really was his vision. In so many ways, he was a visionary. He saw things that hadn't been done yet. And he kept asking, why couldn't we do this? Why couldn't we have color films? Why can't we have a full-length animated feature? Why can't we have a theme park where parents can come, where whole families can come, where it's clean, safe? Why can't we have a second theme park on the eastern part of the country? When his critics would say, "Oh, just like the Grand Canyon, oh, there's only one Disneyland. You can't have two." But Walt envisioned another one on the East Coast with those huge population centers. That's how here in Orlando we ended up with Disney World. Walt Disney World, by the way, which his brother Roy insisted on after Walt's death. So when you go out there, you don't call it Disney World, it's Walt Disney World, and you see the Walt Disney all over the place out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to really look at Walt as a leader. But then the second thing you've got to do, Justin, you got to be able to communicate your vision. It's one thing to have a vision as a leader, but if you can't communicate it well and effectively, nothing's going to happen to that vision. Just staying with Walt for a minute, he could stand up in front of his associates, his staff, and he could act out and talk out an entire movie idea in front of them for 2.5 hours. He could just talk that vision that he had all the way through from start to finish, exactly how he envisioned that it was going to come off. And those people of his would walk out of there just saying, that was unbelievable. Now we get it. Now we can see it. So great leaders really work hard at being good communicators. They communicate in a way that people can understand. I tell leaders all the time, be clear, be concise, be correct in your communication, and above all, be consistent. And then there's a third feature here, Justin, that great leaders have, and it's simply called people skills. Great leaders care about people. They're interested in other people. They have empathy for people. They love people. And the best way to demonstrate that is to be visible and available to people. So many leaders, when they get elevated and start moving up the ranks, they begin to distance themselves. They get up in that ivory tower, and you can't get at them. But the best leaders were always out among the people. Jesus was that way, out among the people. George Washington, during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War, never left his troops. He was with them 8 years nonstop. And then the fourth thing I could tell you about great leaders, they're men and women of character. That's what we've been talking about with this book.
Sure.
But character counts in leadership. Tough to be a great leader if you're not honest, and if you don't take responsibility, and if you've got a cocky, prideful attitude. People are drawn to men and women of character. Character counts.
Absolutely.
And then the sixth thing I've learned about great leaders, they're competent. They're good at what they do. And that begs the question, how did they get good? Born or made?
What do you think?
Well, I get asked a lot, are leaders born or made? And my answer, Justin, is both. Every leader that I have ever studied at some point was born. Every one of them.
Yeah.
Without exception. And they were all developed. But somewhere in between birth and development, something happened in the life of everybody when a situation arose or there was some experience that forced them to step up and take a leadership position. We're going to write a book soon called The Reluctant Leader. I think most people are reluctant. When tapped on the shoulder, we want you to head up the United Way. Oh, I'm too busy. Or I could never do that. Or oh, no, I can't. We all try to duck it in many ways. But at some point, everybody has stepped up and said, okay, I'm going to lead. And once they do that, they want to do it well. And they want to keep improving. And they want to be good problem solvers. And they want to be good teachers. And they want to be lifelong learners. They get excited about being in that role of a leader. And then the seventh thing I could tell you, Justin, is simply this. It's called a serving heart. You serve first and then you lead. But serving-hearted leaders, their attitude is, it's not about me, it's about you. It's not about advancing my career goals, but advancing yours. It's not about my success, but it's about your success and the success of this organization that I'm leading. Okay. So when a man or woman really can grasp all 7 of those absolute necessities of leadership, well, good things happen. Good things happen at home, and good things happen in companies and military units, sports teams, government, churches, schools. When a man or a woman grasps the importance of those 7 sides of leadership, if one or more is missing, Justin, that's an incomplete leader. For example, let's say a leader has 6 beautiful points, but his people skills are awful.
Yeah.
Or let's say he's got everything going for her, but boldness, nah. There's no boldness there. And that organization is just kind of spinning around, with no direction.
Right.
So you've got to have them all.
One final segment ahead with the great Pat Williams right on the other side of this break. Be right back. ESPN 580 Orlando.
Now back to Behind the Law with Justin Clark, right here on ESPN 580 Orlando.
Welcome back to the show. One final segment ahead of Behind the Law. ESPN 580 Orlando. Justin Clark, joined today by Pat Williams, Orlando legend. He's the author of a brand new book I want you to check out, Character Carved in Stone, the 12 Core Virtues of West Point that build leaders and produce success. Pat, thanks for being here. How do I find the book, first of all? Where can I go buy this thing?
Well, Justin, it is in bookstores. That's always, and I love to go to bookstores. I mean, you can order by email and all this, and nothing wrong with that, or by Amazon. But about twice a month, I will be in bookstores, mainly to see what's new,
right?
What's come out, what I might have missed, and it gives you a chance to do some. And bookstores are inviting people to come in and make a day of it. You know, come over and we'll serve you lunch and get a little snack, and you can hang out here, and you got some chairs, and that's a whole new world. And then Amazon, I just ordered, for example, the great Bible teacher Warren Wiersbe has just come out with the Wiersbe Study Bible, and I ordered that, have ordered that through Amazon. So I think a little bit of both, but and I'm also greatly encouraged that we're hearing that the book is in bookstores in airports.
Yes, great. Hudson, is it Hudson? Is that what it's called? I think that's the bookstore. Hudson Books. Yep, there you go.
There you go. And we got word early that they were going to do it, and sure enough, it's happening.
Beautiful.
And I'm beginning to get reports from people in Atlanta or whatever they've gotten it. I was in Austin, Texas last week, and I went in, and sure enough, they had 4 copies of it. I signed them all, took them up to the front counter, and I said, would you be kind enough just to put these right here?
Right.
And they said, sure, we'll do that.
Of course.
So that's what you have to do, Justin. You got to go hustle your book.
You hear interviews with actors, actresses when they have a new movie coming out about how they're so stressed about seeing the ratings, the reviews, that sort of thing. You've written over 100 now. Do you still stress about how many books you're going to sell, or are you kind of beyond that?
Well, it's you want the book to take off. I've often wondered, and I haven't figured it out yet. How do you get a book to take off?
Right.
How did Rick Warren get the purpose-driven life to just explode? How have some of these people, how did Patrick Lencioni get those his book on the 5 good of teamwork or whatever? Right. Man. Well, here's what I've learned from one book publisher, good friend. He said, you can't sell books one at a time. You've got to get the Army working for you. And I said, well, Peter, what is the Army? He said, happy readers, enthusiastic readers. They've read the book, and they liked it so much they began to talk it up. They began to let their friends know, boy, this is a good read.
Right.
And little by little, the Army is working for you, and you're not even aware of it. So that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I hope this is the most successful one you've ever had, because it's fantastic. And really, it's almost 12 distinct stories in a way, too. So, I mean, you can pick it up and put it down and read each chapter individually.
Somebody came to me the other day. He said, I bought the book in the Atlanta airport before a flight to Albuquerque. And he started reading it, and he said, I liked it so much, he said, I put it down. He said, I didn't want it to end. And he said, I've decided just to read one chapter at a time and then put it down. And that way the book's going to last longer.
Yeah, great.
Well,
that's about the best compliment you can get right there.
Kind of an interesting,
I love it.
Interesting way.
So, yeah, I have a lot of respect for you. Everyone in town I know does. And I think most of us know, I mean, you were essentially responsible for bringing the Orlando Magic to Orlando. I mean, without you, we probably don't have an NBA franchise here in this town. But I wonder, you're still around a lot of really young people who are NBA players. How do you feel? Do they respect you? Do they know who Pat Williams is? I mean, what's the respect factor like when you're around these? I mean, even to me, they're like kids now, Pat. How do they
are young. Listen, Jonathan Isaac is now 20.
Wow.
Mo Bamba is probably just turning 20. He's 20. I've got ties older than that.
Yeah, I know.
They were, they were born, I guess, probably in our 10th season. Shaq had come and gone.
Right.
Before they were born. But we do try to give them some background, when they come here to learn something about the history here.
Sure.
And I've gotten to know most of them. I think there's enough oral history that they do pick up on. But I don't make a big fuss about it. Right now it's all about tonight's game and what's going to happen in the next month. And they're not too worried about what happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And none of us should be. Although I will say this, there's a hardcore group of people out there who remember the early days. And I will run into them periodically, and they love to reminisce.
I bet.
They love to talk about something that happened. I was just a little kid, and I did this, and something happened. And I stop and listen to them and reminisce with them.
Any players over your whole history that really stick out, that when you think about them, you just want to go squeeze them because they were so sweet or so nice? You were around Dr. J, Shaq, Barkley. I mean, all of these legends. You have been their boss, essentially, as the GM of the team. Is there any one or a couple players that really stick out in your mind who are just the most awesome people?
Well, Julius Erving, who really revolutionized the way the pro game is played, came to us in Philadelphia in 1976. Class guy, still is. Class guy. Cordial, friendly to people, doesn't try and big-time you. I remember when he was playing for us, we always had to hold the bus because there was one more writer, that wanted to talk to him. And he would treat the high school reporter who was there in the same fashion as he would the sports columnist from the New York Times.
Wow.
It didn't matter to him. He would treat them all equally with the same kindness. That's Julius. He's a special human being as far as I'm concerned. Barkley, from the time we got him, we drafted him in Philadelphia in 1984. He was 21 years old. Finished his junior year at Auburn. He was a character then. Today, he has accelerated that whole role of a character. People forget, Justin, what a remarkable player he was. He was 6'4".
Wow.
That's really what he was. Oh, yeah. He played around 250, 255. But he could do so many things. He could take a rebound off the glass, lead the fast break, put the ball behind his back, deliver a breathtaking pass, or keep it himself and go in and just slam the thing down and have the backboard shaking. The crowd going crazy. He was a talent. He was a genuine talent. And as a power forward, you had to match him up with 6'9", 6'10" guys. He would have to guard with Boston, for example, Kevin McHale, all 7 feet of him. But they had just as much trouble with Charles as he might have had with them.
Sure.
We'll never see his like again. They talk about Zion Williamson and all. But Charles, as I said, he was no more than 6'4". And every night he was giving away inches, but he was an absolute nightmare to guard and play against. He was a special talent. Then, of course, in 1992 came the great moment with Shaq when we won that lottery. That was a major, major event. We'd only been around a few years.
Right.
The DeVos family had just bought the team, less than a year earlier. And all of a sudden, the whole thing explodes. Everybody knew who Shaq was going to be. Now, that's not true of most drafts.
Sure, of course.
It's one thing to win the lottery, but it's a whole lot better if there's a franchise player waiting for you. And Shaq was waiting, and we got him here. And for those years that he was here, he put our franchise on a worldwide map. He was bigger than life.
Absolutely. Pat Williams, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Please check out Pat's new book. It's amazing. Character Carved in Stone, the 12 core virtues of West Point that build leaders and produce success right here. You can get it on Amazon. Go to your local bookstore. Pat, come back and see us anytime, my friend.
Anytime. So nice to talk with you, Justin.
Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you very soon. We'll be see you tomorrow night, ESPN 580 Orlando.